primarily in the role of the HR department who is doing this. So when we think about the different roles and responsibilities and kind of how we focus on things in this class, either from the employer side of thing, the manager side of thing, the employees side of HR, or the HR department, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today or in this tutorial is from the HR department. So probably only 10% of you are going to have to think about this in a more detailed way, and you'll be learning that in more detail in your level 400 classes. But it is important for all of us who plan to be any kind of a manager to understand how we think about what types of employees, how many employees we need to fill the job functions that we are in. So we are bridging the gap from what we learned last week, where we were thinking about the workflow analysis, and we were thinking about every single job in an organization. How does that job, like what are the requirements of those jobs, and how do those jobs work within the organization as a whole? And so one of the things that we focused on was thinking about this work unit activity analysis, where we said, okay, well, here are the particular TDRs that a position has. These are the main KSAOs that position needs to have in order to do their responsibilities. And what are those outputs that they are creating? Either outputs that are happening within the organization or outputs that are happening for outside the organization. And so that was our workflow analysis. Now, next week, we start talking about recruitment, and that is how are we attracting candidates to apply for our organization. Now, in between that, we have to actually think about, do we need to recruit? What kinds of skills do we need to recruit? So this is where planning comes into place for this. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at this chart, and then I'm going to be looking at the demand and supply in more detail. Now here I have figure 5.1, page 185. This is a citation for myself so that I can remember where I got this information, because this is, again, this is not in our, none of this topic is in that free textbook that I have listed on the syllabus. Okay, so think about, all any of your textbooks that you have in management anyway. We really like flowcharts and to think about things in a very linear way. And this is just kind of, images kind of help us orient this information into our mind. It doesn't always work in the most linear fashion, but it is helpful in this case if we try to think about it in a linear way. So here what we have is, in order to forecast, let's look at this top orangish red box up here. We have forecast. Do we have a surplus of employees or do we have a shortage of employees? Now, forecasting is a fairly common activity that any manager has to do. If I'm in marketing, if I'm in sales, if I'm in research and development, if I'm in production or operations, forecasting is a fairly common activity we have to do. Now, the problem with forecasting is that it's not exactly like you're just looking at a crystal ball and guessing as to what is happening. We are using data, historical data, to say, okay, historically, this is what we've done. If we're in operations or supply chain, this is how much we have been producing and sending out to our vendors. So based on historical records, this is what we can think that we'll need to do in the future. Same with human resources. In the past, this is what we've had this amount of turnover, so we need to be thinking about how often we need to replace people. So we do use data. The problem with forecasting is that whenever there's like a big disruption in the economy or in our industry, that kind of turned our forecasting on its head. So we saw this with the COVID pandemic. Pretty much every department who had forecasted, the pandemic just changed every single way that companies could operate for about a year. So forecasting didn't really help in that regard because you had to quickly pivot. It's difficult to train how to pivot. That really kind of comes from experience. So here we're gonna use the how we use data to forecast, and not talk about, we'll talk a little bit about pivoting, but mostly we're going to talk about how we use historical data. Historical data is going to come from things such as we have to think about what kind of demand we need, and we have to think about what supply we already have. And so I'll look in these two in more detail in just a minute. Now, based on the forecast that we have come up with, we then are going to set our goals, and our goals should be linked to the strategic, the strategy of the company or the strategy of the business unit that we're working in, and then we implement and evaluate, right? This is pretty much for every process that we have in management is always think about things, then set goals, then implement, and then evaluate. Same thing we're doing here, but right now we're talking about labor. Okay, so let's first talk about demand. What do we mean by demand is we have to think about how many employees we think we will need. And that comes from a couple of different things that we have to think about. So we have to think about what external environments are going to lead to us needing more or fewer employees, or we also have to think about what internal environments are going to lead us to needing more or fewer employees, right? So demand is not just that we need more employees. Demand could mean that we need fewer employees in the future. So more or fewer, and external and internal. So demand has a lot of moving components that we have to be thinking about. So let's take a look at a couple of different ways that we can conceptualize this. So let's say example one, in looking at more that we need more employees. So let's say, for example, we are a hospital, or we are a assisted living facility. So let's say, so we're a hospital and we have all, we're like a level 1 hospital, and we have all of the different types of services that that a hospital will have. And we're in an area where there is a large aging population, right? So the baby boomers. Well, what happens as we age is not because we're getting older, but we tend to have more injuries, we have more illnesses, things like that. So our hospital probably is going to have to be thinking about more gerontology type services that we need to be offering. Unfortunately, especially for women, as women get older, we tend to have a lot less bone density. Lovely things that happen, 40 at the age of 40 and onwards. So we have to start thinking about those things. So if I'm a hospital and I'm working in an aging population, and I know, science shows us that women start losing a lot more bone density, this leads to a lot more fractures and things like this. I probably need to think about hiring more orthopedic practitioners. I probably am going to have to be thinking about hiring more physical therapists. So after you're having surgery, how do we help aging people who've had to have knee replacements, hip replacements, shoulder replacements, all of these different replacements, or from broken bones? You have to go through physical therapy. So I'm going to have, I might actually just create an entire new business unit that is devoted to gerontology, bone and muscle rehabilitation, right? So aging population, that's external. I'm in a location where there's a lot more older people. So the external situation is aging population. I'm going to have to create more jobs in my company to take care of this. So that's an example of how I need more workers based on external. Now let's take an example of where we might need fewer workers. So we definitely have an increase in technology. This has been an example for the past 10, 15 years. I'm not even going to try to touch on AI right now because we don't really know exactly how AI is going to be replacing jobs or enhancing jobs. It is definitely a hot topic. Every workforce planning committee that I go to, I recently went to the Office of Workforce Services Regional Planning Committee Summit. There's a lot of words in that. It was recent, and they talked a lot about AI, and they said, oh, this is going to replace jobs, but we don't really yet see how that's going to impact the average worker yet. So I'm not going to talk about that one, but we do know. So thinking about the post office, I don't know. In the class, I'll ask you guys to raise your hands. Online, I might have this as one of the discussion points. When is the last time that you mailed anything? So many. I have a book of stamps in my wallet, and I've had that book of stamps for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. Which, yes, that does indicate that I did not send out any holiday cards last year. Bad on me. But there's just not a lot that we mail anymore. Most of our bills we can pay online. Most of us don't really send out too many greeting cards. If we want to, talk to our grandparents, we're just gonna, go visit them. We might even be living with them. We use Facebook a lot to keep in contact with one another. So, like an example, over the weekend, I have a friend and her husband have the exact same birthday, and her husband works as a diplomat, and so they work they usually are stationed in different countries for 2 to 3 years, and so they're currently in a Southern Hemisphere country, and it's their birthday. So I sent her a message via Messenger on Facebook, and then we chatted for a while. My colleagues who I'm friends with, they're all from different countries, and when they go overseas for the holidays, we use WhatsApp. You can't really text very easily from country to country, but you can use WhatsApp. So I don't even really use email anymore. So even thinking about myself, and I'm not ancient, but I am much older than most of you. I'm as an adult, I have seen a transition from writing letters to my grandparents, and they always complain because I write too small, to emailing, to texting, to using Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, things like that. So I don't even email anymore. And so my friends and I, we used to email each other like these long, oh, how's it going? I'm having a great time, blah, 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 blah. And we just don't do that anymore. Everyone is pretty much very short with their messaging, right? So what does this all mean is that it has been a significant decrease in snail mail, meaning, old-fashioned mail. And what does that mean? We have had a lot fewer postal carriers. This is just not really a job that a lot of people can think about anymore. It was one of the top jobs I really wanted when I was little. I have an aunt who was a postal carrier, and I honestly thought that would be the coolest job in the whole wide world. But it's just not. We constantly, I would say in the past 6, 7 years, we have had reports, like the news talks about how the U.S. Post Office is going to have to privatize, or they're laying off people, things like that. So external things that are happening with technology has resulted in needing fewer jobs in this industry, right? So external, internal can mean that we need more or fewer. We probably are going to think about this in our class activity or our online discussion board. So try to make sure that you understand how this works, and this is what we'll practice with. Now, let's talk about the supply. The supply means, again, so demand means people outside of the organization. Supply means the existing workers that are internal to the organization and their various skill sets. So what is our employee supply? This does mean thinking about our existing workers, KSAOs, and what are the tasks, duties, and responsibilities that they are doing. Now, typically, the HR department is going to have this information, I'm going to say on file, which, kind of connotes the, I've got a filing cabinet drawer, but we are keeping this on some sort of database. Medium to large organizations typically are going to be utilizing some sort of HRIS or human resource information system to record keep this kind of information. But you can use Excel. If you're a smaller company, you can use Excel or Word document to keep this. But we have some sort of inventory to say, I'm going to jump back to my pyramid here. There is some sort of skills inventory that is saying I have 20 people who are working in the sales department, and Sally, this is her KSAOs, and this is specifically what she is doing. This is Bob. These are her Bob's KSAOs, etc. Now, it's important to understand our supply because when we are thinking about, so let's go back to demand side. When we are in a situation of that we need fewer people doing a job, we have to start thinking about how are we going to let people go, right? So planning is not always about recruitment and selection. Planning also means how do we reduce our workforce? And we might play around with some of this in class as well. When we are reducing workforce because we have too many people, there are lots of different ways that our organization can try to reduce workforce. And we'll talk about some of these in class or in our discussion board. I can try to let go of like one person here and one person there, but is that really going to be super effective when I've got a really excessive supply? If I have, and there's a lot of human suffering with that as well, right? If you are letting people go, they don't have a job, they're not getting paid, they're not getting benefits, they might be losing their entire social network as well. So there is human suffering that is involved with letting people go. Also, think about, well, we haven't gotten to selection yet, but there's a lot of cost associated with hiring people. So if you have good employees, let's say that we are in the marketing department, and we say, okay, well, we've got a surplus of employees, we need to reduce our headcount. If I've got a lot of good employees in marketing, I might not want to let them go. I just need to move them out of this department. So if I have their skills inventory and I've said, okay, well, here's my supply. Do some of these people have the required KSAOs that I could retrain them to move into the sales department or production or whatever different departments my company has? When companies can retrain employees because of things that are happening, and I've got too many people in this job role, it reduces the amount of money that a company needs to use to hire new employees. It does increase loyalty to the company because okay, well, the company's doing everything they can to keep their employees. That definitely is I don't want to say definitely, but 95% of the time, you're going to increase employee loyalty and you also increase customer loyalty. And those things are very good for branding. So it's important to know what kind of skills inventory you have so that you know, do we need to hire new people? Can we retrain people? Do we need to let them go? Okay, so that is demand and supply. Now, one of the ways that we can keep track, so when we're talking about demand and supply or forecasting, I shouldn't say demand and supply, I should talk about forecasting. One of the things that we need to keep track of is what is the movement of people in and out of the organization and in and out of different job roles, right? So thinking about, I've got so many people in the sales department, how often are we having turnover? How often are they getting promoted? Things like that. That is part of the supply. So how do we keep track of that? We can use a matrix. We can use some sort of matrix. So here I'm going to walk you through how we can use this matrix. Now, if you have never really looked at a matrix before, some of you have a lot of experience with this sort of thing from your different disciplines, but some of you, this really might be one of the first times you've had to use any kind of a matrix. So I apologize if you feel like I'm talking down to you, but I guarantee you that at least 10% of the students don't know how these work. So I always just try to explain it in the most basic detail. When we're looking at a matrix like this, we are going to have rows and we're going to have columns. And we can number them so that how am I wanting to say this? That they represent the same information and that we can follow through each of these rows and columns. So I'll walk you through what we're looking at here, and then I will talk about how we use this information in knowing what our supply and movement is. So here we have, this is just made up information. We are saying that we're looking at the movement for these 7 positions in a 3-year period. So from 2019 to 2022, 19, 20, 21, 22, yeah, it's a 3-year period. With a matrix, and looking at the movement, your organization does have to kind of decide what period of time you want to look at. So remember when I said when we're looking at forecasting, we're looking at historical data, and weird things can happen that are going to, kind of throw that data out of whack, like the COVID pandemic. So, maybe it's not wise that I'm using 2019 to 2022 because we had the pandemic here. So let's just pretend that the pandemic did not happen in this period of time. So let's just pretend that these were normal years. If you are in an industry or you're trying to track the movement of job roles that are very volatile, meaning there's a lot of turnover, then you probably are not going to want to use a 3-year time period because that's too long. You might want to say instead, I know there's a lot of turnover in this position. Let's use a 1-year period of time. If you are looking at a job role that does not have a lot of turnover, so thinking about like any position where you are talking about an actual professional that has had to get extensive training and certification, there typically is not going to be a lot of turnover. So thinking about like physicians, attorneys, professors, things like that, you could maybe even use a 5-year period of time, right? So that's the first thing to think about, is that the time frame for your matrix is variable depending on your industry, job role, and things like that. Okay, so this matrix, we are looking at 7 positions, and we can pretty much say that this is a manufacturing or construction, manufacturing, let's just say manufacturing type of industry. So here we have a plant manager, and the sales position. So these are the 2 functions that we are looking at, sales and production. And we're looking at the time frame of 2019 to 2022. All right, so let's take a look at the first row. I'm gonna have to come out of this PowerPoint slide. Take a look at the first row, and so here we have a number 1, and we have a column number 1. So row 1 and column 1, this is the same, it is representing a data point for that same position. If we look at, don't worry about the numbers yet, we're just talking about a matrix. Row 2 and column 2, you come down here to where, I did not want to move that. You want to come down here to where that number corresponds, and that represents the same thing. So we can see that row 1, column 1, same thing. Row 2, column 1, we are talking about a different thing. All right, so let's see how we can use this matrix. Let's just move this up. All right, so in a 3-year period, I'm just going to stick with the sales manager right now. So sales manager, row 1, column 1, 3-year period. Let's assume that what we're talking about in 2019 is that we had 100% fulfillment in the job role. So 100% sales manager. In a 3-year period of time, we went from 100% to 95% because 1 and 1, that's our same data point. So 95% of our workforce in a sales manager, we lost 5% of the people. Where did those 5% of the people go? If I look at row 2, or column 2 is representing sales representative. Column 3 is representing sales apprenticeship. Column 4 is representing assistant plant manager. Column 5 is representing production manager. Column 6 is representing production assembler. Column 7 is representing clerical. And then column 8 is representing not in organization. So in a 3-year period, we've lost 5% of our sales manager. And we see that 5% did not show up in column 2, column 3, column 4, column 6, blah, blah, blah. They show up in column 5. So, excuse me, column 8. So what does that mean is that in a 3-year period, 5% of our workforce moved outside of the organization. So here we're tracking the movement from one position to the other position, or in this case, not in the organization. Okay, I mean, 5%, we could basically say this is a 5% turnover rate in 3 years. That's phenomenal. For a sales manager, think about where am I going to go as a sales manager? My next position might be as the director of sales. Well, as we're thinking about the hierarchy of our organization, there are going to be fewer and fewer higher level management positions. So 5% of the population leaving, they're probably just saying, I'm ready to move up to a director level position, and I don't have that option in my company. So a 5% turnover rate in a sales position, not bad at all. Okay, let's move down to our sales representative position. Now, let's start with how many people or how many people are staying in that position. So sales rep is row 2, column 2. In a 3-year period of time, we really only have a 60% of our population staying in that job. Where has the other 40% gone in a 3-year period of time? Well, remember here that we only had 95% of our sales managers still in that position. We need to bring that back up to 100%. Where do we get another 5% to make our sales manager 100%? In this company, in this sample, we hired 5% from our sales representative. Okay, so we promoted 5% of our sales rep to being a sales manager. So now our sales manager position is back to 100%. And so that reduces 60% of our sales rep, but we're still missing 35%. Where did that other 35% go in a 3-year period? Well, they weren't demoted to a sales apprenticeship, so that's good. All of these other columns are blank, and we can see that 35% left the organization. Well, for me, if I were a higher level HR position, like if I'm the vice president of HR or I'm the vice president of the sales department, I probably am going to be concerned about a 35% turnover rate of the sales position. Your sales representative is responsible for building your book of business. If I am a manufacturing company, right? So we're looking here at a manufacturing company. I'm not working with the public directly. I'm working with like, let's say I've got a friend who is a plant manager for a gravel and concrete company, and who are his customers are construction companies who are building, and using concrete and gravel and things, but also big box stores. So they supply Lowe's and Home Depot and companies like that. Your sales representative is building relationships with these other businesses, right? So this is a business to business type of organization. If 35% of my sales reps are leaving, then I am losing that relationship that they made with this big construction company, with Lowe's, with Home Depot, things like that. That's significant, right? I don't want to have to, if I'm a construction company, I don't want to have to be building up a new relationship every time with this plant manager with a new sales rep. I'm going to go somewhere else where they can keep their employees. So that's pretty important information for us to know. Losing 5% of my sales manager, I can't really do anything about that. Losing 35% of my sales representative, I probably need to start thinking about all of these other HR things to keep them in place. Now, remember, we still need to keep this position at 100%. So we're missing 4 people. Where did the 40% of our people? So how do we get 40% back into this position is, let's look here. We are promoting our sales apprenticeship. So we promoted 20% up. So we've got 80% now. And let's just move that red box out of the way altogether. We are hiring in 20%, right? So we've hired in 20%, we've promoted 20%, and we've had to hire in 20%. So this helps us when we are thinking about our supply and demand, is if I know historically that we are promoting in from our sales apprenticeship position and that we're hiring 20% out, then that means I need to be thinking about the fact that I need to recruit 20%. I need to have some sort of process in place that I am bringing in 20% outside of the organization. If we wait until the last minute, we're probably not going to, that's not very strategic to wait till last minute, especially for a position that is so important as a sales rep, right? I need to hire people who are qualified. I probably am not going to want to train at a sales rep level. Now that's probably going to be different at a sales apprenticeship level, because an apprenticeship is, when we're taking on an apprenticeship or, employing an apprentice, we are under the assumption that this is somebody who's very green at their job and we are training them on the job. So I probably don't need you to have a lot of skills and knowledge because I'm training you. So I probably can be very reactive with this 50%, right? So we're hiring in 50% of our sales apprenticeship, but I probably do need to be thinking about what distribution channels I'm using to get my apprenticeship. So am I going to trade schools? Am I going to university? Am I going to community colleges? Where is it that I'm going to be targeting to get this 50%? Right? So now another thing to keep in mind with looking at this example is you can see that you don't have any cross-pollination between the different job units, right? So 4, 5, and 6, those are production job roles, thinking about that organizational pyramid. 1, 2, and 3 are sales job roles. And you don't see any movement between people moving from production to sales. You can walk through this labor supply movement and see your plant manager is not moving over to your sales manager. If there was, you would see some sort of number here. Your production management is not moving over to any of your sales position, or you would see numbers here. Right? So this is a way that we can use matrices to see where a movement is going. Okay, so some of the possible in-class activities or online activities that we will be doing is we might be thinking about our demand and supply needs based on your current workplace and job role. We might be thinking about how to reduce an oversupply of labor. We might be trying to create a matrix for your job role. So just kind of keeping in mind some of the things that we might be doing in class or online. So this is a fairly short tutorial because I'm not putting recruiting in here. We're only going to be talking about planning right now. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to our learning process during the week. Thanks, bye.
Thanks, bye.